On the morning of August 15th, 2002, something terrible was discovered in the quiet community of Oak Level, Virginia. A husband and wife devoted to their family and respected in their town were found murdered inside their home. Their 9-year-old daughter, Jennifer, was missing. Law enforcement launched one of the most exhaustive searches and investigations in the region's history, but what they found over the next 6 weeks struck the hearts of everyone who followed the case. This is the story of the Short family murders, a triple homicide that has haunted 2 states for more than 2 decades and remains unsolved.
Michael Short, aged 50, and his wife Mary, aged 36, lived with their 9-year-old daughter Jennifer in their Oak Level, Henry County, Virginia home. Loved ones and neighbors all had a similar outlook on the family, that they were extremely close, quiet, and happy. On August 15, 2002, an employee arrived expecting to meet Michael for work, but instead found tragedy. Both Michael and Mary had been shot once in the head, execution style, and their phone lines had been cut. There were no signs of robbery, and hundreds of dollars in cash remained on the counter. At first, authorities hoped the couple had been killed while someone abducted Jennifer, and that she might still be alive and could lead them to the murderer. As a frantic search began, investigators, family, and community volunteers combed nearby woods and roadsides, hoping for a breakthrough. An Amber Alert was released to the public spanning hundreds of miles to include the D.C. area, and any leads were thoroughly investigated. Nearly 6 weeks later, the worst fears were confirmed. On September 25, 2002, a homeowner in Stoneville, North Carolina, discovered a human skull near a rural pond after his dogs brought odd debris to his yard. Law enforcement responded and uncovered skeletal remains under a nearby bridge, along with teeth and bone fragments. Tests soon confirmed the remains were those of 9-year-old Jennifer Short, who had also been shot in the head. The discovery ended the hope of her safe return, but galvanized public interest in the case and left questions that have never been answered. Despite extensive efforts by the Henry County Sheriff's Office, the Virginia State Police, the Rockingham County Sheriff's Office, and the FBI, no one has ever been arrested or charged in connection with the murders. Thousands of pieces of evidence were collected, and over the decades, law enforcement has retested, re-interviewed witnesses, and explored new leads with modern forensic methods. In recent years, a multi-agency task force was formed specifically to re-examine the evidence using newer technology. One publicly released lead was a composite sketch of a man seen near the Short home around the time of the murders, described as a weathered-complexioned male, along with a sketch of a white flatbed truck seen in the area that morning. Despite these efforts, the identity of this person and whether or not he was actually involved remains unknown. The Short family murders deeply affected the local community. Each year, motorcycle memorial rides are held from Henry County to nearby Rockingham County, raising awareness and scholarship funds in Jennifer's name. The family's home, once a site of such devastating violence, remained standing for years before being destroyed by fire in 2019, the cause of which was never fully explained. Locals still wonder if the blaze might have destroyed valuable evidence. So looking at this case, I think that one of the most glaring pieces of evidence that we've seen has been the fact that the phone lines were cut before the murders were taking place, which a lot of people say points to the fact that it must have been a premeditated murder. I know that they kind of had a hard time finding a suspect, and then from what I read, it seems like their main suspect that they thought could have been it was then later disproven. What do you think about the cut phone line, and how much notice do you think that would have had to have been done to not alert the family the night of, but still be effective in that they couldn't call for help?
I believe it was one of the officers that later became sheriff said it had to be somebody that knew what phone lines look like, how to cut them, so it just cut off just the Short family and not other people in the neighborhood. So it had to be somebody that kind of knew what they were doing along those lines. Mm-hmm. It's definitely premeditated with the intention of them not being able to call for help. And I guess it was fairly well known that Michael would occasionally sleep in the garage, fall asleep in the garage. I read something that he snored, so he would watch TV in the garage, fall asleep on the couch, and occasionally sleep there so that his snoring didn't disturb his wife. But did they know that he would be there? Did they know the family well enough to know their habits? I also saw a lot of conflicting information when I was reading about this case. So one thing I read was that it was a carport, and another one I read that it was a garage and the door was open. So, and that's two completely different things too. If it was a garage with the door open, did he normally fall asleep with the door open? Was that normal? It was August, so it was probably warm. It was probably, in the evening, it's nice to have the garage door open. But when his employee went there the next morning, I read that he said that the garage door was open and he found him on the couch. So if it was somebody that knew their behaviors, knew that he would likely be in the garage because he was familiar, or was it just by luck that the garage door was open and he came upon him first and eliminated the biggest threat in the household, and then went in to find Mary and shoot her, and then took Jennifer? The biggest question in this case is why?
Yeah.
So the prevailing theory is that it was somebody who saw Jennifer and decided that they wanted Jennifer, and that they were going to eliminate the parents in order to get to her.
Right.
The thing that I don't understand about that is there's a lot of opportunities to possibly do that without killing the parents, taking the child. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
So why kill the parents to get to her? But I also read that they were, like you said, pretty close, and so maybe there weren't a lot of opportunities to get to Jennifer without the parents being there. I don't know. I think they lived off of a main road, but it was, not somewhere where she probably walked to and from school or to the grocery store, stuff like that. So maybe there weren't a lot of opportunities to access her without the parents. But there's still, lots of kids that have been abducted from homes without the, parents being murdered. So what was the thought process there? And that's something that's unanswered in this case. Is it seems to be premeditated, because why cut the phone line if you aren't going to do something where they might, need to call the police? But also, it seems pretty intentional that the parents were killed. And was the sole purpose to get to Jennifer and abduct her?
It does appear so, especially because her body wasn't in the house. So there was a few weeks of time where she was in a whole different state. I do wonder, though, what could have caused her murder then, if the whole point was to kidnap her. I think it's almost a little bit strange that she didn't last longer than a few weeks. And I wonder what could have possibly happened to make the abductor suddenly decide to leave her in North Carolina.
Well, and that's the other thing too. Was it an abduction because he was going to keep her, or was it an abduction just so that he could assault her and then planned on killing her? He may have planned on keeping her, but she was, maybe too upset, and she wasn't doing what he had fantasized about her doing. So he may have just said, "Oh, this is too much. I can't do this. I can't continue doing this," and just, shot her. She was shot in the head, similar to her parents. It was a small caliber, 22 caliber gun. I know that they did retrieve a 22 caliber rifle from
That's what I was going to say next.
in the house, but I personally did not see anything that ever tied that gun to the murders. So it's likely that the gun was brought and removed from the scene as well. It's just a lot of questions, because why? And we say she was taken to a whole different state, but it was like 35 miles away from where she lived. So it wasn't like it was, traveling a great distance into another state. But it was, their house was in Virginia. She was found in North Carolina. She was found, I believe it was a creek. I also saw conflicting information. I saw one thing that said it was a pond. But apparently next to her in a creek. And the decomposition was significant.
So that's what I have a question on too, because it was, I believe, from when the parents were found deceased. It was only 6 weeks until she was found.
Correct.
But she was literally just bone fragments and absolutely like no flesh left. And so, yes, of course, it does seem like she was just left to the elements, but is 6 weeks really enough time to decompose that thoroughly?
So, again, environmental factors come into play.
Yeah.
So if she had been in the water, she, scavengers could have pulled her out of the water, but she could have suffered the additional, conditions of being in the water that sped up decomp. It's also August. And so the hot temperatures speed up decomposition as well.
Yeah.
And then if there was predatory behavior, which from what I understand, the remains were scattered and mostly skeletal, and her scalp, the first piece of her that was brought to the homeowner, whose dogs basically found her. But the first thing that was brought was part of her scalp with hair, and he thought it was a wig.
Yeah.
So he threw it away, and then the next day he thought they brought a turtle shell, and it was a part of her skull. So, and then they did a search and found multiple other body parts, but never a complete skeleton. And so, as we've talked about in previous episodes, like the scavenger behavior, they can pull a body apart, and then as soon as there's open flesh, all animals and bugs get in on it. So it's beetles and all scavenger type animals are going to be in there doing their scavenging. So it's not impossible for her body to have reached not only a level decomp, but also just a scavenged remains. And that is a really good explanation for why her body parts were spread about into different locations. It's very common for animals to take what they can take and take it back either to other animals, or just go somewhere where it's safe for them to eat without having to be in fear of another animal coming and trying to take it away from them. So it's very common to see it spread out if that's the case. She was shot in the head, so that wound would have also attracted scavenger behavior as well.
And so do you think that she was shot and then just kind of deposited into this river to...
Yeah, and I don't know if she was in the creek or near the creek. I think her remains, again, like I said, if her remains were even started in the water, it could have increased the process of decomp, and then she could have been scavenged, prior to that fully happening, and her body pulled out of the water by a larger scavenger, like a coyote or something like that has the strength to pull a 9-year-old child out of a creek in order to scavenge. And so I think that it's just, again, it's combination of factors. The water definitely could have sped it up, but the heat is really what's gonna speed up the decomposition. Yeah.
And it is interesting too, because there was I've read $600 sitting on their kitchen counter. And so whoever went in really worked fast and left this poor family in ruin, took the girl, but then also killed her very quickly too. And so I do wonder, whoever this person is, the motivations are just so strange. What a quick time frame for something so tragic.
Right. I think if his goal was to abduct Jennifer, then it makes sense that he went in, just did what he thought he had to do, and got Jennifer and got out. So it doesn't surprise me that things were not burglarized. He probably, if that was his sole intention, he was probably had a single focus, and he wasn't going to wander around and take a chance. We also don't know as real specific time frames. So again, I found a lot of conflicting information when I was reading on this case. So one of them was that I heard mostly that the employee that had come back in the morning, that he had been over there working on a work truck with Michael in the garage. And I read that Mary, his wife, had gone to a fast food restaurant and got a late dinner and brought it home. The worker said that Jennifer was already in bed before he left. But I also read something that all three of them went through the drive-thru at Burger King.
Right.
Which I only read one thing that said that, but that doesn't line up. And with the other accounts of that Jennifer was already in bed and that Mary got the food and Michael stayed and was working in the garage until late. But I read that the fast food like went to the Burger King around 11 p.m.
Yeah, I heard that too.
So I think that's how they got the timeline of about midnight, because by the time she got home and they ate their Burger King and got settled, they figured it was probably about midnight. When they were discovered just before 9 a.m. in the morning, I don't know if they were ever able to establish like a more definitive time of death. So, because that is a 9-hour time frame, and usually that can be determined, like they can, try to get a little bit closer time of death because they can determine, how far are the bodies, into rigor. But it's going to be different for Michael and Mary because Michael was out in the garage and Mary was inside the house. And so if Mary's inside with air conditioning, her body is going to probably set, into rigor at a different timeline than Michael's if he's outside in a humid, hot August garage.
Right.
So I don't know if they were able to actually pin down a closer time of death based on their, investigation at the scene. But that was the time frame, was midnight until 9 a.m. on August 15th in 2002. So, but yeah, it's also interesting because shortly after they were buried, they exhumed Michael to get more evidence.
Right.
Did you ever read anything about what that evidence was, or whether they were able to get what they were looking for?
Yeah, so I read that they were after his hair because they had not done it in the original autopsy.
Okay, I did read that as well.
And so there was I think a running theory that they were trying to determine if he was the real father of Jennifer, and then
okay, I do remember that.
And then I believe that the sheriff at the time was like, yeah, that was something we were considering. However, he was proven to be her biological father, and we just didn't want to come out and say that earlier because we had still hoped that Jennifer would be alive.
Right, and I think part of the reason that came into question, now that you remind me, is Mary had a stalker.
Yes.
In the early days of their marriage at a previous job, and so apparently the guy had come to her workplace, and some people at work had to escort him off, and then they asked if she wanted to call the police, and she said, no, I don't want the police involved. So then there was some speculation that she had been possibly having like an affair or something like that. So then one of their theories was that this person who could have been Jennifer's father had come and taken Jennifer, and that was the reason. And so their concern with confirming or denying Michael's paternity was that if the real father found out, or if the abductor found out that he wasn't the real father, that there was a higher likelihood that he would kill her if she was still alive, that he would just get rid of Jennifer so that there was no ties to him, no witnesses. So that was, I guess, their hesitation into kind of, because they were asking, did you confirm that he's the biological father? And they were kind of vague about it and not really forthcoming with that information. And then I did read that later, after they found her remains, they did confirm that he was the biological father.
Now, did you read that the stalker was driving a white pickup truck? Because I thought I read that somewhere, and then when later the FBI came out with that sketch, they said that there was a white pickup truck. And of course, I mean, there's so many different brands of trucks like that. Really isn't
and this was a flatbed
line.
And I don't remember them saying that it was a flatbed that the stalker had been driving, because that's a very distinct thing. I mean, like you said, there's so many different types of white pickups. There's S10s and Toyota Tacomas and Tundras and Ford,
3 more than I know,
so. 350 and 150 and Chevy and GMC. So it's like the possibilities are endless, but a very, very distinctive feature is that it's a flatbed. So I don't remember seeing that the stalker was driving a flatbed specifically.
Okay.
But that was also years earlier.
Right,
So the
right.
reason that they thought it was part of, paternity was in question. Like Jennifer's 9 years old. So, some people keep vehicles for 9 years, but other people
Yeah.
don't. So, that
Not reliable.
yeah. And, so the other thing that I am really curious about that I found conflicting information on, and I'm curious to see if you ever saw anything that kind of confirmed one or the other, but is that on the Virginia State Police website and in an interview with the Henry County Enterprise newspaper, with the officer who actually responded to the scene, they both say that police were going to the house for a well-being check.
Yes.
And located the bodies. That it was Michael's employee that called in that well-being check. I read other articles that said that the employee was the one who went to the house in the morning and discovered Michael in the garage, because him and Michael had made plans for him to come to the house in the morning, and they were going to drive together to another location for Michael to purchase a truck for his business. And so those don't really line up. And the article that was in the Henry County Enterprise was from just August of last year. And so the first on scene officer who said that they were there on a well-being check is now the sheriff. And he said that they were on a well-being check when they discovered the body. So I'm not sure which account. Like, I can't see the police, saying, both the state police and the sheriff's office saying that they discovered the bodies and they were on a well-being check, if that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But then all these other accounts that it was the employee that discovered the bodies.
Well, it is, and I do think that maybe that's a result of so many people being involved and so many people trying to give recounts. Because I saw an article where the employee had actually said that he was first on scene, but I agree with you that it just doesn't make sense for the officer who arrived on scene to suddenly think it was a wellness check and that he was the one. So
there's a big difference, like a welfare check or well-being check.
Yeah.
You're going to check on somebody who's like, hey, they were supposed to show up somewhere, or we haven't heard from them for 2 or 3 days and this is unusual, or they missed their dialysis appointment, stuff like that. Like, I see all the time.
Yeah.
But if the employee had shown up and found him non-responsive, shot in the head, pretty obviously deceased,
Yeah.
he would not have called in a well-being check. He would have called for an ambulance, for police, he would have called 911. So it doesn't make sense to me that he discovered the bodies, but then he called in a well-being check. But also, I'm not saying that he is a suspect, because they said that he's been very cooperative, but there's a big difference between, like, he was the one that last seen the family alive, and then he was the first one back on the scene 9 hours later,
Right.
and or like 9 or 10 hours later if he left around 11, and just the well-being check versus him discovering the bodies and calling 911. So that's a big question for me, and not that it's necessarily like placing him in a place of being a suspect, but it's just a weird kind of conflict of information in this case. Because, like I said, that's on the Virginia State Police site about this case, that it was a well check called in by one of Michael's employees. And then it also was in the interview with one of the first responding officers, who's now sheriff, that also said it was a well-being check. So that one's just kind of puzzling to me.
Yeah, and I do think, and again, you can really go down kind of like the Reddit rabbit hole with what people will report they've seen. And I know that one of their main suspects was unfortunately a victim of being kind of plastered for like almost a decade. And then it was kind of built off of a account that ended up not being true. And so that really does speak to the danger of false recounts of what you think happened.
Right. And it was actually, they pressed charges against 3 people for that false witness statement.
Yeah.
Apparently, these 2 guys wanted to get the reward money.
Yeah.
So they reported that this guy had been seen, that they saw this guy leaving the house carrying a child.
Yeah.
So, of course, they have eyewitness accounts. These 2 people that, came up with this story,
Yeah.
are telling it as fact. So they basically put all of their resources and focus on this one person. And they, like, in hindsight, they said that was a real disadvantage because they weren't looking at other options. And there's a lot of stuff that happens like in the very beginning days of a investigation in the first few months that couldn't be redone at a later date. So there's stuff that you can do, years down the road that you couldn't necessarily do at that time, but really it's so critical to do that during the first few days, the first few months of the investigation. And several of the things about this individual that brought him into being the main suspect for a considerable amount of time was that the body was found like a mile from where his mobile home was parked.
Right.
So it was very suspicious that it was so close. His landlord also called in and said that that he saw him with a gun that day, and then the next day his trailer and everything had been gone, or were no longer there. But he had told, according to the landlord, this person had made a statement that he had talked to somebody about moving his trailer, and that if they didn't follow through or refund his money, he was going to kill them.
Yeah.
And then he said that he saw him with the gun the next day. So, of course, you have these 2 people that fabricated this eyewitness statement.
Yeah.
And then you have the landlord coming in with this information. So, of course, he looks like a good suspect. But he left the day after the murder. So,
Right.
with that timeline and with Jennifer being found like a mile from his house, that means he would have had to, be out of the house prior to 9 a.m. And then he would have had to kill Jennifer that day.
Yeah.
And deposit her body, which does line up, with the level of decomposition and that her remains were. It was 6 weeks is a month and a half. Like, it's not that long. So that would line up. But he then left to go to Canada, which was suspicious. Like, why are you going out of the country if you didn't just kill this whole family? And so he had gone all the way up to this town that's like north of the Arctic Circle. And apparently he was going to live off the grid, but he was a raging alcoholic.
Yeah.
And he got arrested for drunk driving in Canada, and then there was immigration issues. And so as soon as he got done in court up there, they deported him back to the United States. And then he was brought in for questioning. He actually was charged, and it was sent over to the grand jury, and the grand jury did not come back with an indictment. So he was never charged with this. And then, like you said, it come to find out, it was all like, I don't know about the landlord. I don't know if his statements were ever disproven, but the other 2 men were actually charged. And there was a third person that were actually charged. The attorney general, I think, pressed charges against them for like conspiracy and all these other things. And then it said, the one account I read said they will spend many months in jail. And it's like, this guy's life, he was tortured for a long time with suspicion. And he's like, this is going to hang over my head until you find the right guy.
Yeah.
And it did.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't really ever have another good suspect in this case. And they said because of these 2 men coming up with this false statement, trying to get the award or reward money, that it really hindered the case. And that's really unfortunate. And it's such a good reason not to do this stuff. I mean, they weren't thinking about that. They didn't care about this guy that they were falsely accusing. They didn't care about the Short family. They cared about themselves and the money that they wanted to get out of this situation. So, I mean, they weren't thinking about it, but it's just kind of a message to, everyone that false information or unverified information can really be detrimental to solving a case and actually getting justice. So, on that note, though, I was just going to mention that in that article from last year, so it's again, it's still August of last year, so it's pretty recent. They said that authorities continue to seek information from anyone who had contact with the Shorts between August 1st and 14th of 2002. So just the couple weeks prior to their murders, had a mobile home moved by Michael's company MS Mobile Home Movers in 2002, and if you haven't already spoken to investigators, anyone who had contact with Michael Short during his trips to South Carolina in the spring and summer of 2002, particularly in Bennettsville, Florence, Conway, or Myrtle Beach. So they're still actively working this case. The Henry County Sheriff's Office is actively working it. They have an investigator assigned. The Virginia State Police are working on the case with them, and then it's also with the FBI. So they're all still, like you said, they created the task force. They have looked into additional DNA evidence. Now that, 2002, there's been a lot of advances in DNA since then. And they did, like, as you mentioned, come up with over 1,000 pieces of evidence from the house. They said that there was a lot of evidence in the house. Obviously, like, the money still being there is evidence, but it's not necessarily evidence that's going to tie, that money to a suspect. Like if he handled it or there was blood dropped on it or something. But it's definitely, as you've mentioned in other episodes, like the absence of things is evidence as well. And then they also exhumed Jennifer's body at one point. And did you hear anything on whether anything was discovered for that or the purpose of it?
So I actually could not find anything about why they wanted to exhume Jennifer's body again. I'm unsure. I think that what I've seen so far is what they've been doing right now. It's very much kind of like close-lipped, which is interesting, seeing as how it's now 2 decades after the fact. But no, I didn't see anything as far as what they tested on Jennifer.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't either. The task force, I think the FBI out of that task force did go to those cities in South Carolina and specifically looking for information. But I think they're just imploring the public, if you do know of anybody or if you are one of these people that, had contact with them during that time frame or in South Carolina. Because the family, apparently, Michael had this business of moving mobile homes. But I think around 2002, like the business and the sales of mobile homes had gone down. And so his business was struggling a little bit. So I had read that he was the house was up for sale, and they said the house was immaculate, that they walked into the house and it looks like a showroom because they had it just, looking super nice for open houses and viewings, to sell the house. And their plan was to sell the house. And then he said he had a mobile home of his own and the family was going to move into this mobile home. And I think that they were looking at South Carolina as a potential place to move and kind of start over. So I think that's why they're looking at the South Carolina angle a little bit. They were also thinking, which is why the landlord, statements were kind of poignant, is because, could it have been a situation with Michael where he did have a disgruntled customer or something like that? That doesn't really, I don't see that really lines up with, the methodology of this, because if he wanted to get back at Michael, like, he could have just taken Jennifer and made Michael suffer. Or something like that. But why kill the parents and then take a child and kill a child at a separate location?
And after the fact, it's not as if the parents had to watch her die, which would have been really, I think, pointed towards some sort of like hatred or
retaliation or something. So it's just, could it have been related to Michael and his business? Possibly, but I think they kind of, they spend a lot of time and energy and effort kind of going down those paths of, could it be related to Michael and his business somehow? But, you know, sometimes these predators who target children just see a child and there's just something about that child that they fixate on.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just opportunistic, but sometimes these predators have certain things about certain children that just kind of they get hyper focused on.
Yeah.
And they like just any old child isn't going to work for them.
Yeah.
It's a specific thing. And so it may have been one of those situations where Jennifer was just, you know, she was the target and it was just specifically her that he wanted, and he didn't care about the destruction that he caused getting her. But then in that case, like it's, you know, was his intention to kidnap her, assault her, and then kill her right away? Because it just seems, you know, like so extreme to just kill her, you know, with the same day or within a few days.
Yeah.
And again, there's so many things that we'll never know that could have occurred that ended up being the case, even if that wasn't his intention. But yeah, it's just this one is you know, there's just a lot of questions unanswered, and once they, you know, eliminated this person as a suspect, they just didn't really have any other good suspects. And even the sketch, I don't even really know where that came from. And this
and it
white
seems
truck.
random. Yeah.
And it came in like 7 years after the fact.
Yeah.
So this is like before Ring doorbell cameras. This is before there's any kind of like a lot of surveillance cameras on businesses and stuff. I mean, it existed, but it wasn't as common as it is now. So, you know, where did this come from, and how could they definitively say, oh yeah, that was the morning of when this occurred,
Right.
during that time frame? So it's just, and also if there was a flatbed truck that just kind of rolled up, why didn't it wake Michael up?
Yeah.
Too, if the garage door was open.
It's like wide open.
Yeah. So I mean, there's just a lot of questions, and it's just frustrating because I know that the family wants answers. I think even the community wants answers. Oh, and the other thing we haven't talked about is the fire.
Yes, I was going to say the fact that the house was lit in 2019 is also kind of weird. Do you think that there is, like, do you believe the idea that they were doing it to make sure there was no extra evidence extracted? Or do you think it's just kind of like a freak accident? Because I read that there were other, like, houses that burned down, and it did just sit in the lot for those decades.
Yeah. So I think it's one of probably like three things. So one of their theories was that because of the advances in DNA and stuff, that the suspect or perpetrator was concerned about there being DNA evidence in the house. That would, like, was he sweating profusely and it was dripping on the floor? Did he cut himself? Did he assault Jennifer in the house before he took her? Because if he just went in and snatched her up and he was wearing gloves and he was, you know, had a hat on, like, what are you worried about finding 20 years later?
Yeah.
So there's that. So that's kind of like, I think, kind of a long shot.
I agree.
There was another theory that that there was just an arsonist in the area, and it was a vacant house, and so maybe it was just an arsonist that saw an opportunity just to watch a house burn, and there was, you know, nobody living in it.
Yeah.
The other theory that I did not see mentioned but came into my mind was that house was auctioned off in December of 2002. So they were murdered in August in the house. It was auctioned off in December of that year. But they said it sat mostly vacant for that entire time.
Yeah.
So who bought it?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Why didn't they try to resell it?
Yeah.
Is it because of the murders in the house that people didn't want to live in it, or they couldn't sell it? And if that's the case, did they burn it down for insurance?
Yeah,
purposes.
I was also going to ask about that.
So that's what kind of came to my mind, just because it was vacant. Like if somebody was living in it, or they were able to rent it out or make money off of it, but if they didn't want to live in it and they were having a hard time trying to resell it, then the only thing in my head is that, oh, let's burn it down and get the insurance money, and then we'll just be rid of it,
Yeah.
So I don't know that area. I don't know what the housing market is. I don't know if the murders, because it was just rippled through the community, and it was so shocking.
Yeah.
And just had such a legacy of this horrendous event that happened there. If they just couldn't, sell it or rent it out. And it also was a small town. I think it said like less than 1,000 people. So you may just not have like a ton of people needing to rent or, or wanting to move there. So I just, my like gut or intuition is telling me it was an insurance thing, and it didn't have anything to do with this case.
Yeah.
So, but we will, possibly never know, unless somebody finally confesses to the murders and burning the house down. So, obviously, they're working very hard on this. The current sheriff's department is very dedicated to this. They have a investigator assigned to the case. It's still being investigated. It's still being worked, and they're working on the DNA angles. They're working with the state police and FBI still, and so I know that this isn't one that's like just sitting. Like the current sheriff, who, like I said, was one of the first responding officers, he's like, I want to solve this case before I retire. Yeah. So I know that it's very important to him to try to continue to work this case really hard. Yeah. So if you are any of the previously mentioned people who they want to speak to, I definitely recommend reaching out to the sheriff's department there, and or the state police, Virginia State Police, and assisting in the investigation.
Absolutely. But again, only with verified true information to prevent another kind of
detour.
Waste of
resources, a detour, like another dead end. Yeah. Yeah.
Or worse, another person framed who had nothing to do with it.
And I think that's the hard part, is you don't know what information is good or bad or helpful or not. And I think when you're doing it in that spirit, like, hey, I don't know if this is going to be helpful. I don't know if this is legit, but I heard this, or this just, never sat right with me, something that happened or something that somebody said. Like, that's perfectly legitimate information to give. Like, if you're like, oh, I was sitting at the bar and I overheard this guy like talking about, something, and it's just, I just couldn't shake the feeling, that it might have been important or whatever. Right. Like, that's something that you can bring forward, and then the investigators can kind of, vet it and investigate and see if it's legitimate or not. But it's just kind of like the wild theories that come out of nowhere, or you're just like, oh, I know for sure so-and-so did it. And it's like, well, what is your proof? What is the probable cause? What is leading you to this assumption, other than, it's just who you want to believe. Is the suspect in this situation. So, because I know that happens a lot, like with these cases, like, oh, it's definitely the parents, or it's like John Bonet, it's definitely the brother, well, if it definitely was and there was proof, then he would have been, charged by now. So we, the thing with our justice system is that we do have to have proof, which is good. And innocent people still end up incarcerated, which is horrible. I think that's one of the worst things that can possibly happen. And so we just need to be absolutely sure that the investigation is legitimate and thorough, and the probable cause, that we're not just doing everything on conjecture or like speculation. Like, there has to be and circumstantial evidence can be compiled to create a case, for sure. Like, there is absolutely cases that have been solved and convictions made on circumstantial evidence, but that circumstantial evidence has to still be overwhelming enough that there is no doubt that this person is the one that committed that crime, and it's not the possibility of somebody else having done it. And like in my review of cases, like I've mentioned before, like sometimes you'll be going through and it's like, it's definitely this guy. Like there's no way it can't be this guy. And then you'll, read about the next suspect and you're like, oh man, like it could totally be this guy. And so it's just really a disservice to the investigation to get tunnel visioned on one particular person, like happened in this case. And I mean, they were getting information that was like eyewitness, so it's like obviously it needed to be investigated, but also, what are the other avenues that could have been explored? Because it is a small town, and it was intentional with the phone line being cut. It wasn't just like, oh, I happened to come upon this house and
someone must have known enough about the family, or at least the layout of the house, to know where to enter, know where, again, the biggest threat of the house would likely be, and go there first. And it did appear as if they were shot in their sleep. And so being able to do so much, again, like so much havoc on a home without alerting anyone currently in the house is...
Well, and that was one of the things that they said too, because Michael was in the garage and the door from the garage to the house was closed and she was asleep, and it's a small caliber gun. So, it may not have woke her up with the first gunshot. And that was why they originally thought that Jennifer probably just ran away from the house, because, maybe the gunshot that killed Michael didn't wake them up, but when he goes in and shoots Mary, maybe Jennifer heard the gunshot and got out of the house. And so they did this massive search, like ground search in the area behind the house, like looking for her in case she was just hiding and scared. And they didn't locate her. And so then they were like, okay, well, that's probably not what happened. She probably got abducted, and that changes the whole, situation. And, but one of the things they said too, as far as like knowing the layout of the house and everything, is that they were selling their house. So they reached out to the real estate agents and everything to say like, hey, who's been looking at the house, who's been in the house, have there been open houses, stuff like that, because you can go view a house and then you have a layout of the house.
Absolutely.
And like if they have family photos up and stuff, like, who's in the house. So there's just so many possibilities and so many things that, but I do believe that they did, look at that. So I don't know. I just don't know. This one is...
It's tough. And it's weird to have a small town, a whole family murdered, and no suspects, because really, I mean, there's so few people to even consider, but it had to have been someone close to the family. And so it is just so interesting. And I think that's why people are so motivated, because the answer's got to be findable somehow. And so I'm grateful that there is such an active task force that's taking this on and working through it again and again.
Everybody's really invested in finding out what happened and who killed them. And it's not a requirement of the law to figure out why somebody did something. Everybody wants to know the motive. Everybody wants to know why, somebody did something. But the law doesn't require that. And the prosecution doesn't have to prove why. It just has to prove who and how. So, but, we're humans, and we all, especially if you're into true crime, you want to know the why. Like, why did they do this? Why did they feel they needed to kill the parents? Why did they take Jennifer and then kill her and dispose of her so quickly? And, was that the intention? Like, what went wrong? All of these things, so... And I don't know the layout of the house. I don't know if that was ever publicized, as far as like how close Jennifer's room was to her parents' room and all of that kind of stuff either. So they did say that in her bedroom that the bed had been shifted slightly. And that, most houses had carpet still at that time. So I'm guessing, because they said like 2 inches, so I'm guessing that they probably measured that by the imprint in the carpet from the bedposts. But and they found a pillow on the floor, which indicates that he probably went in there and snatched her like right out of the bed.
And
I agree. I don't know if it was shifted like away from the door or towards the door, but it makes sense. Like if he went in and like kind of, if she was laying across the bed a little bit, like if he pushed into the bed and shifted it that way as he grabbed her and lifted her off the bed. So, I feel like that was pretty hasty. Like I feel like that was all a pretty quick process, and that's why, you know, there being much DNA in the house. Like if he just, you know, shot Michael, shot Mary, grabbed Jennifer and left the house, I just don't see that there would be a lot of DNA evidence left in the house.
Right. I agree with you.
Especially if he was smart and wore gloves and a hat to make sure he didn't lose any hairs or, you know, stuff like that.
Right. Right.
Which we don't know, but because also in 2002 forensics were coming, but you know, it has made a lot of advances. So, but I think it was still 2002. I mean, CSI even had been on television by then, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
So, I mean, it's not like forensics wasn't on people's radar.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a lot of questions, which is always makes the case so much more frustrating. But again, I just think back to, I think that for the Short family, they have an incredible amount of support behind them. And my hope is that maybe in a little while we'll be doing another episode to update this with some closure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, doing some updates on cases where they actually do solve it and we get to do a update. So
absolutely. And I think that's a really good part of this show, because I know I definitely look back at articles for everybody that we've done so far. And so
yep. I mean, even just new information would be interesting, you know, just anything that they have discovered or any new leads or suspects or anything would be interesting to see, because it's just a huge question mark on this one. And I mean, I don't think there's a single, you know, viable suspect at this point.
Not at all. No, I don't believe so either.
Yeah. So, and just such a tragedy. And, you know, just thinking about Michael and Mary died so quickly, which was a blessing for them, but the amount of fear and terror that Jennifer probably went through before she died,
right? And
then to just be discarded,
which also leads me to believe that maybe she didn't recognize the person, because I would imagine if there's no trust or no recognition, she probably did give them a hard time and kind of encourage that quick end, which
I heard that she was a very sweet girl, so it's not like I didn't hear like, oh, she's feisty and like,
no, not
you know,
at
she
all.
doesn't take any, you know, BS from anybody. So it sounded like she was probably like a very sweet, kind of more timid girl. So I don't know, but even just crying like constantly can sometimes just set people off. So
or even just like questioning, like, where's my mom and dad? Where are they? And you know,
so I definitely hope that this one, it's really nice to see that that law enforcement is so invested in this case still, because a lot of times, you know, if there aren't leads, if there aren't suspects, if there's not new stuff to look into. But they did say in that interview, let me get back to that real quick before we wrap this up. Was the interview, I think, with Henry County. Oh, yeah. It says the task force was created in 2023. So that was just, you know, 3 years ago. And that was 21 years after the murders. The task force has made substantial progress over the last 2 years, because this article is from 2025, including obtaining additional funding for DNA testing. So I also wonder if maybe they didn't exhume Jennifer for potential DNA on her. So I don't know if they did, you know, fingernail scrapings and all of that kind of stuff when they, oh no, they didn't even have. So I'm not sure what they could have potentially got off of the few remains that were there, but apparently, you know, they must have some DNA to test against. If they're, you know, getting additional funding for DNA testing. So and then one other thing that I thought was neat that I wrote down here. So because they have been working this case so hard.
Mm-hmm.
The sheriff in this article and this interview said, we have put numerous other child predators in jail that came to their attention during the investigation of this case. So because they're working Jennifer's case so hard and they're trying to figure out, why she was targeted and who could have targeted her and all of this stuff, they've been going through, all of these other people, and they have discovered these other child predators and actually put them in jail. So even though they haven't found a suspect or found the guilty party of this particular crime, just the investigation in itself has been a service, to protecting other children. So I just thought that was a neat thing to mention, because a lot of times that doesn't get publicized. It doesn't get, it doesn't make the news articles and the updates and stuff. It's like, oh, and by the way, we haven't, located Jennifer's murderer yet, or her parents' murderer, but we have been able to prevent other children from being victimized because of the investigation of this case, or, prevented somebody else from getting raped or from getting murdered. So a lot of times, you do come across suspicious people, and then if you're working multiple cases and you see patterns, you see overlaps and stuff, then you go, oh, maybe I need to look at this person for this other case. So, but it was just kind of a cool thing to see, because even though it's tragic that there aren't any good suspects and that there's nobody, no person of interest in this case, the fact that, the investigation has led to convictions of other people.
Definitely something to be grateful for and use for more hope.
Anything else?
I think that's about it. I think you're leaving off on a good note with the convictions, and we'll keep you guys updated if we see anything else. And thank goodness for everybody involved in this case, whether that's the police department, sheriff department, or even just viewers who continue to keep her name out there.
Share, repost, all that kind of stuff. Again, they're actively asking for people who were in contact with the family the 2 weeks prior to the murders, which was August 15th, 2002, and people that they may have spoke to, that Michael Short may have spoken to in those cities that were mentioned in South Carolina. We'll add that list to our blog post, along with all of the links to the articles that we researched for this case. And then, if you do have some information, or if you can even just help spread this so that it gets in front of somebody who may have information. I know that they would love to, talk to more people that could provide more information.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.